Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Are you ready to defrag your minds? Well, stay tuned because we have much to share with you tonight. What do we have to share with you? Well, we have discussion tonight about populist politics, Pierre Poilievre, how the conservative sided or minded politicians are all sort of signaling to the populist movement. We're going to talk a little bit about those wildfires out west in Canada. We're also going to tell you about the federal government falling short on its promise to Stellantis, and as a result, that big, huge government-subsidized, taxpayer-subsidized battery plant for electric vehicles in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, appears to be possibly in jeopardy. An F. Trudeau party ties into our discussion about populist politics. We're going to show you again better footage of that missile strike in Ukraine that resulted in what is likely the biggest explosion to date in that conflict. And we'll talk about where we're at with the war in Ukraine. And the question I have for all of you is, are you really prepared? Are you ready for World War III? All that and more coming up right here on the Maverick News Channel.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching. Fear not the storm, for truth is on our side. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Here it is again. We showed you this explosion on the last program. Wasn't here yesterday. Thanks everyone for being patient with me while I took one day off. But I'm glad to be back tonight with you to share this additional footage of what is a Russian missile strike inside Ukraine, destroying, some say, as much as $2.2 billion worth of munitions that we paid for here in the West with our tax dollars. And this resulted in what some are also describing as possibly the largest explosion to date in Ukraine during, as part of this war that I think is now escalating into, well, we already are already in World War III. But this, I think, is a prelude of more things to come in this vein. Now, I have to say that I believe those explosions are real. This does appear to me to be edited, two pieces of footage together, so I don't know exactly how accurate it is. I throw that out there because in this current environment, in this new information warfare age with digital technology, artificial intelligence already coming into play, I don't know sometimes exactly what is real, what is fabricated, what is edited, what is raw. That has clearly been edited. So I just point that out for those of you who are maybe not cluing into that. But you have two separate pieces of video footage. The other thing is that missile, I understand, may have been hypersonic. A hypersonic missile is capable of flying at many times the speed of a bullet. How you're able to track that with a video camera, I'm not sure, but there you have this shot. Certainly the explosion happened. Certainly that munitions depot, also I think there was fuel there. It was destroyed. This was a few days ago. And it signals, I think, a prelude of what we are likely to see more of in this conflict as the Russian special military operation continues to proceed. And we're seeing all kinds of different information and conflicting reports from both sides coming out. The question is, are you ready for World War III? We're already in World War III, in case you haven't noticed. And it's pretty much Russia against all these other NATO countries at this point, with a little bit of support from China, indirectly, not fully committed, and countries like Iran. And tonight, we know that Russia is seeking more support. They're looking for more drones. It's my understanding that, and I'm just going to pull up some notes here, that Russia acquired about 400 drones from Iran. And let me just see if I can find these notes that I had. And they're looking for more. Let me take a quick break here. I'm still compiling stuff here, getting things ready. There was so much going on just before the newscast, and there's so much information to absorb every day that it is difficult to keep up and honestly get everything prepared when I'm all by myself. But just give me a second and I'll be right back.
We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, no! 2 bucks!
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now, at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program. For your mind.
Okay, I'm back. So yes, so this is not exactly from today, but it's certainly worth mentioning because it is unfolding even as we speak and developing. But we do know that Russia is looking to buy more advanced attack drones from Iran. They did purchase previously an estimated 400 of them. They are not really terribly expensive in terms of military armaments, but they are very cost effective. And we've seen that the war in Ukraine has been not just an artillery war, but it's been a war of drones. So the Biden administration did publicize satellite imagery last year and intelligence findings that indicated Iran did sell hundreds of attack drones to Russia. And for months, officials have said the United States believed Iran was looking at selling hundreds of ballistic missiles to Russia as well. But Washington never did come forward with any evidence that a deal was finalized. So those drones, those Iranian drones, some people initially were saying that they were cheap and wouldn't be effective because they were junk, but the reality is they have been quite effective and extremely cost effective. And they've been working fairly well. The Shahed drones that Russia purchased, they pack them with explosives and then they send them in. They are targeted with GPS. And then they, they basically crash them into the target, loaded with those explosives, and they take out their objective. So what we're seeing here in Ukraine is an escalation of sorts. I mean, it's just been an escalating creep, a little bit at a time. It's sort of like boiling the world in a pot of water slowly, just like a frog, right? You don't really realize it. They're trying to boil Russia in a pot of boiling water. And I think what we're also seeing is a multi-pronged approach from all the different NATO countries. It keeps Russia a little bit off center, off balance, because they're not able to always direct their attention to one particular country. The additional aid, for instance, for Ukraine doesn't always come from the United States. It doesn't always come from Canada. It's like it's on a rotating basis. One week it's from Germany, the next week it's from Canada, the next week it's from another NATO country, and it goes around and around. And we see a little bit more and a little bit more. And we're looking at potentially even aircraft being provided as we move ahead with this now. And so we're seeing just ongoing, continual creep and more money being spent over time. And I am sorry, I've lost some of my notes here tonight, folks. I'm a little bit behind things. So I think what we'll do is we'll shift gears because, yeah, I don't think my the notes that I emailed to myself came through the system. So I've only got about half of what I prepared for the program tonight. I do apologize for that. So I need to get myself reconfigured here. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that did not come through. That's okay. I can wing it. We'll get through this because we're all in it together. So what we'll do now is I want to move on to, and I'll probably come back to this stuff about Russia and the Ukraine war. But what I want to do now is I want to move on to a little bit of Canadian politics. I don't know if you saw this. Oh, that note, that didn't come through either. It's okay. I've got it over here. There's more than one way to get at this. Well, let's start with Pierre Poilievre. Somebody called in the other night and referred to this. No, that didn't come through either. So I don't have my notes on that. Wow. Oh, this is okay. I've got this. This is a new promo from Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And I want to talk tonight about how these political parties, all of them, whether you're talking about even the the Republicans, right, MAGA, that's certainly happening over there. But these political parties are all sort of signaling to the populist movement. Pierre Poilievre is trying to do that in a discreet way as leader of the Conservative Party. When I say populist movement, that really is largely the freedom movement on the Canadian side. And the other night, I think it was Deb called in, and she was upset because she saw this promo from Pierre Poilievre, who referred to the people as the common people, and she found it insulting. And I understand her perspective on it, and I think some other people kind of backed her up on that in the phone-in portion of the program. But I think that it's improper. How shall I put this? It's Poilievre trying to signal to the populist movement, the populist factions in the country, without coming right out and saying that he wants your vote. He's also trying in this promo that she referenced. She referenced actually there are two different promos that are out right now with Poilievre, making very specific reference to people as the common people. And there's a reason for it, and there's a reason for choosing those words. And what he's really, I think, trying to show people or tell people is that his government would be a government of the people, a people-oriented, citizen-oriented government. At least that's the language he is trying to use, without coming right out and using the same language as Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada or some of these other smaller populist parties that have emerged out in Western Canada. And and even, the same language as Trump and the MAGA movement, not using the same language, but certainly trying to appeal to the same group of voters. Let's watch the promo, and then I will comment on it. And I'll explain. I think you have to watch it so you understand the language. Here we go.
Your passport. Why has Trudeau redone it to delete Terry Fox, who ran halfway across the country on one leg to fight cancer? Why did he delete the Vimy Memorial, which honors 3,598 soldiers who died? Why did he delete this beautiful war memorial, or even the Parliament buildings beyond it? Well, to answer that question, You need to get the country that Trudeau wants us to become.
Level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship. Admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship.
Or when he said, El Comandante Fidel Castro was a larger-than-life leader who served his people for almost half a century, a legendary revolutionary and orator. Like the leaders and regimes that Trudeau so admires, he's censoring what you can see and say, including his online censorship bill, a bill so controversial that even legendary liberal author Margaret Atwood had this warning. So does creeping totalitarianism if governments are telling creators what to create. But here's the problem for leaders that want to control everything. The only way to justify it is by promising a utopia. Now, utopia is a beautiful word, but in Greek, it actually means no place. You cannot promise to take people to no place unless you start in no place. Put more simply, the only way you can redraw an entire country is to wipe away the existing painting so that you can draw on a blank slate. Or as Orwell said, the past was dead, the future was unimaginable. All that was needed was an unending series of victories over your own memory, reality control. So they knock down statues of our past leaders, they delete words, they delete achievements, they even delete our most wonderful and treasured heroes. Even Nellie McClung, who, along with the rest of the famous five, proved women were persons, got erased from Trudeau's passport, this by a so-called feminist prime minister. Our soldiers, our Mounties, our explorers, our champions all had to disappear. Why? Because they show that Canada is amazing, above and beyond its government. If Canada is already amazing, how could you justify having the state bend and twist it into something completely different, as he tries to do every single day? We can have no heroes, and our history must be portrayed as a wretched pile of injustices to justify remaking everything from scratch. Instead, our national story in this passport looks now more like Justin Trudeau's personal coloring book, filled with trivial little things like Canadians raking leaves or a squirrel eating a nut. The country must be made little so that his state can be made big. There can be no heroes from the past that get in the way of the man who appoints himself the hero of the future. The regimes that Trudeau admires portray the dear leader as the only hero that could ever be. But you and I both know that the real heroes are not on state billboards or state television. They're the common people, the folks who over centuries had to wrestle control over their lives from the crown and put it in the hands of commoners. Our democratic tradition goes back 800 years to the Magna Carta, when the common people forced King John to sign the Great Charter that brought in liberty under the law. And over those 800 years, through fits and starts and many flaws, we've evolved closer and closer to a more democratic place where the people are in charge. That is a precious inheritance. It may be 800 years long, but it's only one generation deep. And if this generation, the living generation, fails to pass on what we inherited from those who came before to those that come after, then it could be lost forever. That's why it's so important to keep our common stories, our common symbols, and most importantly, our common sense. A passport is known for taking us abroad, but sometimes the most important thing, especially when it comes to our traditions and freedom, is to bring it home.
So that is Pierre Poilievre. And you see that the way he's using the word common, he's not meaning it in a pejorative sense. He's not certainly not trying to insult anyone. He's saying that the government should be there to serve the people, which is exactly what we're hearing from the populist movements in both Canada and the United States. A government of the people, by the people, for the people, blah, 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 blah. Those words, honestly, are very American. It signals or references, gives a nod to a country as a republic, the United States of America. And you're seeing on the populist side of the freedom movement, at the very center of it, this common law, sovereign citizen core, rebranded as a freedom movement. And around it, there are many people who call themselves freedom fighters or are supportive of what has become a freedom movement, when in reality, at the center of it, there's this common law philosophy or ideology. That is why, and there is merit in the language or the reference to the word common, common law. Common law does form the foundation of much of Canadian law and even US law for that matter. But the system has been refined over time. It is not just a straight up common law system anymore. It forms the basis for it, but we've got codified law. We have a criminal code. We have divisions of different levels of justice, divisions of powers between various levels of government. The system has been refined, and it's all written down so that people know exactly what the law is. But Pierre Poilievre is using that word common because Canada does have a foundation in democracy, and democracy flows from that concept of government by the common people, that the power really rests with the voters, the citizens. And he's making reference to that. It's more than that too. It's him saying that he's there to represent the working people, the common man. And I think he's also trying to show that he is not, he's trying to tell people anyway, that he's not an elite, that he is one of us. That's what he's attempting to do. But by using that word common or commoners, I've seen just in the last week that some people are interpreting it in an entirely different way, or at least they're choosing to. Maybe they are legitimately feeling that way when they watch his videos and he uses those words. It's as if he's looking down his nose at you like you're a commoner and he's something more, an elite. But what he's saying is that the government is really just a job, that he serves you, that the politicians are supposed to serve you. And the system really was originally set up that way. And there are even references to the way the system works, even the House of Commons, the use of the word commons is a reference to the House of the People. But it's a Canadian or a parliamentary reference. It's not the same kind of language that we see in the United States, where they would say a government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's an American thing. In Canada, you know, like in the United States, they have Congress and they have their system of government is set up differently. In Canada, we have a parliamentary system. In the United States, they do not. They have a totally different system. But we do have a government of the people, or at least we're supposed to. And that's why they refer to the House of Commons as the House of Commons. It's the House of the people. And who sits in the House as members of Parliament? Your member of Parliament, the person that you elect within your riding to go to Ottawa to represent your constituency, your riding to represent you and your neighbors, to represent your community. And who is it that you elect? You elect someone from your community who knows your community, knows your local issues. That's the person you go to when you have concerns. And then they're supposed to take your concerns forward and present them in the House of Commons. And when the system is working properly, that's the way it goes down. A lot of people don't understand how the system works. And honestly, I see a lot of people, even within this freedom movement and across the political spectrum, really, Canadians, who don't understand how the system works at all. And they're ready to tear it all down because they think that it's completely broken, corrupt. It's doesn't work for the people. It doesn't represent the people. We don't have any chance of electing anyone any different because it doesn't matter who you vote for. You get the same outcome. I understand the frustration, but a lot of that comes from the fact that people are ignorant of the system. They don't know how the system works. They don't know how to utilize the system. They don't know how to make it work for them. And they're listening to people who have other political motivations, aspirations, who are ready to tear it all down, who want to tear it all down. So they're telling people that the system doesn't work. And to be sure, the system certainly is being abused by a government that we have in place right now that has learned to manipulate it, use it to its own advantage. And we've seen a lot of government overreach. But when the system is working, it really is supposed to represent people. And the people who are most frustrated are really just the ones who didn't win the last election, or maybe the one before, or maybe ever, and don't feel like they're truly represented in the House of Commons. But, you know, in Canada, the political system is set up so that it's not a winner takes all proposition. If you have the ruling party might even just be in a minority situation like the Liberals are right now. They can only govern with the support of the NDP. So that the two parties working together in the House of Commons with combined votes on various pieces of legislation, they carry the day when they work together, because the Conservatives are generally in opposition to just about everything that they want to bring forward. But you do have, really, in the House of Commons, 4 different parties represented. You have the Liberals with the most seats, the New Democrats, the Conservatives as the official opposition, the New Democrats supporting the Liberals. You've got the Greens, and you have the Bloc Québécois, which really supports Quebec. Sorry, let me turn off my phone. People calling me during the show. And so throughout the course or the term of this Liberal government, Liberal NDP coalition government, really, these other parties still have a voice, and they represent other political points of view that are in contrast. So you may not win the election, or your party might not win the election, but the other parties do have the opportunity to voice opposition, mount opposition, and express their political views in the House of Commons to bring the voice of the people to the floor. That's the way it's supposed to work. And it largely does work that way. Most people don't see it that way, though. And I've seen just, even within the last few days, more rhetoric from people saying that the system needs to be revised because you don't get to vote for the person you want to vote for or something. This coming, from some videos out. I don't need to mention the names. And that they want to be able to vote directly for the prime minister. That's a US kind of a thing. It's a totally different system. But even in the United States, if you vote directly for a president and you get your guy in, that president still has a limited amount of power. There are restrictions on what even a president can do. So the system is just different in Canada. And this use of the word common, it keeps popping up in Poilievre's videos. Here's the other one that was referenced tonight. And this is Poilievre at Pearson Airport in Toronto. And again, making reference to the word common. Just check this out and we'll talk about it.
Here at the Pearson Airport, getting ready to line up. More chaos at Pearson. What else is new? But I just had a great weekend meeting with the common people, listening to their common sense. I just want to remind everyone politics is supposed to be a blue-collar job. Check out these booths. That's what it's like to be out with the people in the rain, attending their festivals, listening to their stories, hearing their dreams, celebrating Canada. We're going to make it the freest nation on earth. Once again, based on the common sense of the common people, united for our common home. Your home, my home, our home, Canada. Let's bring it home.
So when I listen to that, like, I get why it could be interpreted as being a little bit snobbish, because he's saying this is what it's like to be out with the common people. Yeah, I get it. He's trying, though, the reason it's coming off that way is because my take on it is that he is trying to use that word common because he's trying to keep it Canadian without making it more American. He's trying to keep it within the parliamentary system framework in the use of his language and not make reference to these common law ideologies that are out there within the freedom movement that subscribe to the destruction of the Canadian system, that advocate for the severing of ties with the monarchy to end the entire system that we have and replace it with something new. Whatever that is not clear. But he's not making specific reference to that. And he is trying, I think, to avoid making references to things in an American way, which is why he's using the word common, just as the word common is used in the House of Commons. This is my take on it. And you can interpret it any way you want, obviously. Some people are saying that he's looking down his nose like he's a snob. I didn't quite get that. I think it's just the way that one video right there that I ran kind of comes across. It was maybe not his best video, that's for sure. But that's the way I'm seeing it. And you're seeing other politicians as well sort of signal to that populist movement by using words that are pulling from that common law sovereign citizen movement from within the freedom movement. Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, as she was campaigning to capture the leadership of the United Conservative Party, which she did, which gave her the position of Premier without actually going through an election. She's in an election now. But when she was campaigning for the leadership, she was going to bring forth, what was it called? The Sovereignty Act. That was a signal to the common law sovereign citizen freedom movement, which is very strong. Perhaps it's strongest out in Western Canada and Alberta. She was signaling to those folks in her use of the word Sovereignty Act, in my view. And then, of course, when she got into power and the Sovereignty Act comes into play, it really meshes with the Constitution and existing laws. It all, but it doesn't really call for the separation of Alberta or the restructuring of the legal system or the Constitution per se. What the Sovereignty Act really did was reinforce what the Constitution already provided in terms of defining provincial versus federal powers in Canada. But from a political standpoint, she certainly was signaling to the populist movement, and that she needed to incorporate into her base of support to propel her to the leadership position within the United Conservative Party of Canada, or of Alberta, rather. And there she sits right now, and she's now into this election. Another example of reaching out to that populist base, because the populist movement is also drawing from that common law sovereign citizen movement. It makes up a portion of it. But it's controversial, it's volatile, and that is why Pierre Poilievre and even Danielle Smith have been very careful about taking it up to a line, but not crossing the line in the use of their language. Because if you go over the line, it signals an affront to the existing system. It, in some cases, is signaling a separatist sentiment that you want to tear the country apart, that you want Western Canada or the Western provinces to separate from Canada. You want maybe Quebec to separate. That's what the Bloc Québécois has advocated for years. It's a delicate balancing act. They want the support, but they don't want to tear the system down unless you're on the other side of the line and you really do want massive change such as that. And that's what we're seeing with some of these other smaller parties out west, and those kinds of movements have been present for decades. Going back to even, I can think of movements as far back as the 1920s, 1930s that called for the separation of Canada and Western Canada separatists. It's been present for a long time, still there, stronger than ever, fueled by the pandemic and the government response to it. People very unhappy with the situation politically in Canada. It's never been, I think, at a lower point in terms of confidence in our institutions, confidence in our politicians, confidence in the system. And that has made the system itself easy prey at this point for some of those who advocate for the destruction of it and the replacement of something completely different. Now, Maxime Bernier, representing the People's Party of Canada, I've seen him as well, cozying up to this common law sovereign citizen network of groups across the country, tapping into the freedom movement, using the freedom movement as really a base of support for the PPC. So last Friday, Maxime Bernier, leader of the PPC, formerly a conservative, a member of the Harper administration in Canada, last Friday he announced he's going to be running in a by-election in Manitoba in an attempt to capture a seat so that he can represent the PPC in the House of Commons. He was defeated in the last election again in his home riding of Beauce in Quebec. But now he's running in this upcoming by-election in Manitoba. I have his announcement queued up here for you, and we will go to that so that you can hear a little bit of what he had to say. If you missed this, you'll see that he is really appealing to something, to a set of issues and even values that have always traditionally been the focus of populist politicians in both Canada and the United States, appealing to Christians, appealing to morals. He's making reference very specifically to drag queen story time, woke politics, identity politics. Let's bring up Maxime Bernier, and you'll see how he too is appealing to the populist movement. This is the Populist Party, really. It could be the Populist Party of Canada, not just the People's Party.
Big news to share with you today. But first, I want to say and to speak a little about what's happening in our country these days. You know, you will understand that my announcement will make sense after that. Today, our country is at its lowest point in living memory. And I believe that you agree with me on that. So, I say with the confidence of experience that we no longer have the country I grew up in. Canada has changed dramatically and for the worst. So we need to be here and to do what needs to be done for this country. For years, we've gotten less and less for our dollar, and what we get is not the same quality as before. Inflation is eating away our standard of living. Government and household debt has skyrocketed, and as you know, our healthcare system is hopelessly broken. But even worse than the state of our economy is the state of our culture. We are living in a highly immoral times. Everywhere you look, you see example of moral and cultural degeneracy. Radical cultural Marxists have seized control over our educational system, the mainstream media, and governments. They pushed a program of anti-life, anti-family, and anti-Canadian values. Gender ideology and the trans movement are promoting the confusion and mutilation of our children. It is very sad what is happening in our country. It is useless to debate with these extremists. There is no common ground. They seek only one objective: to destroy Canadian society as we know it and upend the traditional structures of life which have underpinned our civilization. Their insanity is undermining our traditions, our history, and our nation. The woke cult is demolishing the traditional pillars of our society and aims to establish a twisted and profoundly sick vision of the future. They are moving at a rapid pace. Do you remember 10 years ago, there was no drag queen story hour in our schools and libraries? 10 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to indoctrinate 7- and 8-year-olds and force sexuality upon them. Now you can go to jail for opposing the transition of your child. We are living in a completely different society, one overtaken by evil. And do you want to know the worst? So the worst part of that is as these pervert ideas are being pushed everywhere in Canada, there is not a single MP fighting against these in the House of Commons. Let that sink in. We are losing our society because a few people are fighting for it. The elites are totally on board with this radical transformation of our society. And those who reject it are silenced and smeared as intolerant, racist, and transphobic. And you might ask, what about the Conservative Party? What about our supposed to be Conservative Party? The so-called Conservative Party has conserved nothing since its inception in 2003, after the merger of the Canadian Alliance, the Canadian Alliance with the Progressive Conservative Party. As I said, when I left that party in 2018, they are morally and intellectually corrupt. When whether it is a gender ideology, mass immigration, climate hysteria, the cult of diversity, or abortion, the CBC has refused to fight the necessary cultural battles. They are too scared of negative coverage from the mainstream media and being called bigots. They have sat on their hands as the radical left has taken over our society. What is the Conservative Party of Canada doing today? Some of their most prominent MPs, including their deputy leader, promote so-called Transgender Day of Visibility. The men in that party walk around in pink high heels and prostrate themselves before radical leftists. They are not coming to the rescue. They will not stop the sexualization of our children. They will not stop cultural Marxists from rewriting our history. They have give up, and they are not ready to do the most important battle that we must do for our country. But I can tell you, I'm ready to fight. The PPC is ready to fight. And I left the Conservative Party for one reason. I know that if we do not fight for our values and culture, we will lose everything. That is why I'm proud to announce that I'm, putting my name forward in the upcoming by-election in your riding. I'm ready to be your representative in the House of Commons because we know that families deserve a strong voice, and I'm ready to be that strong voice for you and for the country. This riding has a strong tradition of electing conservative-minded members of parliament. It elected a Reform Party member in the 1990s. And I believe that I'm the right person as the leader of the People's Party of Canada to represent its voters today. Today's fake Conservative Party have no real arguments as to why we should vote for them instead of voting for the People's Party. They cannot compete with our policies, our ideas, our principles. All they can do is to attempt to smear us and scare Canadians into voting for them. Their tired argument that, oh my God, we split the vote makes no sense. And listen to me. The People's Party and the Conservative Party have very different policies and principles. It is not us. It is not the People's Party who are splitting the Conservative vote. On the contrary, it is the Conservatives who keep moving and moving and moving to the left to split the Liberal vote. This split the vote argument is even less valid today in the current situation in a by-election. No matter the result of this by-election, the CPC will not form the government. We will still be with Justin Trudeau. But this is not an opportunity to get Trudeau out. But it is an opportunity to get a new voice in Parliament. The Liberals and the NDP are not competitive here. This is a two-horse race between the People's Party and the fake Conservative Party. This by-election is about giving a voice to the people of Portage-Lisgard. It's about your values. It's about who will represent you in the House of Commons to defend with passion and conviction your values and Canadian family values. And I believe that I'm that man if I have your support. Do you want a strong voice for families or another fake conservative who will say one thing when he's here in Manitoba, but be silent when he returns to Ottawa? Do you want a member of parliament who respect and fight for family values, or another so-called conservative who takes your vote for granted? So send me to Ottawa and I will speak out against the anti-family policy pushed by Ottawa elites. And I will do that right now during this campaign, before the campaign, during the campaign, and after the campaign, until we win the battle of ideas. And I believe that we will, because it's sense, and common sense will always prevail. I must say that I'm sure some of you are wondering what this Quebecer doing running in southern Manitoba. How can he represent us? That's a good question. Over the past few years, since I founded the People's Party of Canada, I've been lucky enough to make many stops across Portage-Lisgard, even more so recently when I was building the team for that by-election. When I visit Winkler, Morden, Portage, and many other communities in this riding, I am reminded of both where I grew up, the riding that I represented for 13 years. Both is a rural riding with the same values like you here in Manitoba. But I'm also reminded of so many special corners of our country that I had the privilege of visiting in my years campaigning to give a voice to the voiceless. When I talk to people here and across the country, I keep hearing that they feel forgotten by an Ottawa elite class focused on PEP social issues that are irrelevant to us. I have a message for those who feel forgotten here in Portage-Lisgard. You will not be forgotten anymore. I will be your voice in Ottawa, and I have been defending the same principles and policies and ideas and values consistently for many years. If you believe in these principles, if you believe in yourself, if you believe in freedom, responsibility, respect, and fairness, I'm with you on that. We will do that battle together. And I will fight, always fight for you and for all Canadians. And that's why I can say that I'm your man. I won't change and I won't compromise. The battle is too important, and that's why we can make history here in Portage-Lisgard, and we will do that together. I will be in the House talking about the issues the fake conservatives are too afraid to even discuss. And yes, I will work and with them, with the fake conservative, and vote with the fake conservative whenever they find enough courage to try to work like real conservatives. That's a win-win for everybody. You will have somebody that will fight for your values, and when the conservative will find the courage to fight real conservative values, I will support them. I know that the People's Party already has a lot of support in this riding. In the last election, we had our best result across the country here in Portage-Lisgard. Thank you very much. We need to build from that support to be able to win, and we will do it. This is where we hosted, here in this riding, the biggest PPC rally in the party history. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was near Winkler. 3,000 patriots came out to support our fight for freedom. It was the biggest rally held by any political party during the last election. Just outside of this riding, I was wrongly arrested 2 years ago. And I will be in court next Tuesday to fight that. I was wrongly arrested 2 years ago for refusing to comply with immoral, unconstitutional, and very, very bad policies that they imposed on us. Yes, all these policies and mandatory vaccine passport, and remember all that time. So I was there to fight for freedom of choice, like I will always do. So these are just a couple of events that have drawn me to this area of the country over the past few years. And I can tell you that I feel a special connection to this riding for the values that we share together. And I can tell you, this is where the renewal of our country will begin, here in Portage-Lisgard. Together, we will redefine what it means to be a conservative in Canada. One more or less CPC MP will not make a difference, but one People's Party member of Parliament will offer more opposition against the radical left than the entire so-called Conservative Party. We saw during the COVID years just how morally bankrupt and ineffective the 119 CPC MPs truly were. For 2 years, every last one of them stayed silent, including their leader, Pierre Poilievre. They did nothing as the Liberals and the NDP worked hand in hand to steal our freedoms, destroy our economy, and coerce millions of Canadians to take unnecessary COVID shots. We have here right now a special opportunity. It's simple. The opportunity to jumpstart a much needed political revolution in our country, to make history by electing the first ever People's Party Member of Parliament and adding a badly needed true conservative voice to the House of Commons. And for me, this situation today reminds me of a lot of the Reform Party of Canada. I don't know if you remember the old Reform Party. Back in 1987, Preston Manning and the Reform Party was funded to give a voice, to give a voice to frustrated conservative Canadians here in Western Canada. The People's Party policies are very similar to those of the Reform Party back then. The Reform Party first entered Parliament in 1989 when they won a single seat in a by-election. Like today, we are and will be in a by-election. In the subsequent general election in 1993, 51 more Reform MPs were sent to Ottawa. And the following election saw them become the official opposition. All the populist conservative Reform Party needed was a foothold into Parliament, a single seat, and then the floodgates opened. I can tell you, we can make history and do the same with that by-election here in Portage-Lisgard. Despite never forming the government, the years with the Reform Party in Parliament saw some of the most conservative governments in my lifetime. The Liberal minority governments with Reform in opposition were arguably more conservative than the subsequent Harper government. The People's Party will pick up the torch from the Reform Party, and it starts right here, right now in Portage-Lisgard. And I can tell you that we have learned from the mistakes of the Reform Party. We won't merge with a corrupt political party. We will never compromise our values. We will fight until we win and restore sanity in our country. In 2023, a true conservative voice is more necessary than ever. The radical left has been unopposed for too long, and the impact that it has had on our culture is obvious. We need a strong voice for our families in Ottawa. The Liberals and
Okay. So we'll wrap it up there. Some important takeaways there, though. He did reference the Reform Party of the 1980s and, what bled into the 1990s with Preston Manning, referring to that as a populist party, using that exact word. I think he's on the money there. The question is, if he were to be elected, or if you had other People's Party of Canada members elected, how far would they take reform? And how enthusiastically would they embrace the populist ideology? Not just he refers to conservative values. He keeps talking about conservatism. That honestly is what attracted me to the People's Party of Canada in the very beginning, when it was first founded. That's why I, for full transparency, went over to the party at that time. What I've seen, though, in the past couple of years is the party shift its policies, or at least its campaign strategy, to align more and more with these common law groups, this network of groups. And he's been tapping into that network. The question is, how much would he reform things? Now, here's the other message. I think that he's not really delivering specifically, but something that everyone in this country should take note of in Canada, maybe in the US too, but certainly in Canada. And the takeaway here is things can change. They absolutely can under the existing system. Maxime pointed it out here in this address. I've pointed it out several times, and I referenced former Prime Minister Stephen Harper in a meeting at a conference that he was at just recently with the former leader of the Reform Party, Preston Manning, where Harper called for a conservative renaissance in Canada. And during his speech, he made reference to the gains that were made back in the 80s by the Reform Party, and then the things that evolved from that within the political system, where we saw from reform this creation of, at that time, the Alliance, and then from the Alliance into what is now today the Conservative Party of Canada, where conservatives were reunited. They reunited the right, or the conservative movement. But within that, you always get this strong progressive wing of the party, the old progressive conservatives, the progressives, who are really just liberals in disguise, who also populate probably at least half of the Conservative Party, or the Conservative Party of Canada now. So when you bring the conservative element back in and you unite those two, you get the progressive wing of it coming back in. However, the point to be made here is that in Canada, we do not really have just a two-party system like they have in the United States. Republicans and Democrats. You want Coke or Pepsi? And people get frustrated with that. Of course they do. I totally get it. Do you want Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Take your pick. And some people would say it's the same damn thing. Well, in Canada, you have multiple choices, many choices. And we've seen through just recent history that things can change dramatically and quickly. It all comes very slowly until it comes very quickly and almost instantly. These things can change, and they will change, and they do change. You'll see it change. Maybe we'll see some sort of a change in this by-election in Manitoba. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll see more status quo. It's very difficult to say. I would say if Maxime Bernier can't win here in this by-election, he might be in trouble overall with the party in general. He didn't win his riding in Quebec, and he has to win this one. If he doesn't win here, it's going to look bad. It will be somewhat embarrassing, especially after him making note of the fact that they had such a strong following, a strong turnout voter-wise in that riding in the last federal election. So he has everything aligned for him there. All the ducks are in a row. He has every possible positive thing that he could have going for him right there. Except that maybe he will be viewed by some as an outsider because he's from Quebec. He speaks French. His English isn't as strong as maybe some people would like. And he's out in Manitoba where it's pretty much Anglophone territory. That might be a bit of an issue. I don't know. We shall see. The point that I'm making is the people who are calling for the entire system to be torn down are now being given an opportunity. A lot of the people who are calling for it, being given an opportunity to elect someone into the system. And maybe they're holding out hope that Maxime Bernier would get in there and fight to have the entire system reformed, dismantled. I would say don't count on it. He comes from the Conservative Party. And while he does certainly want a shift in policy and a shift in ideology, a shift away from cultural Marxism, I don't think he's committed to completely tearing down the system. Although, I have to say, I am a little perplexed as to why he has formed such strong alliances with some of the people and organizations that he has over the past couple of years. Not entirely perplexed. He needs a base of support and a network, and he's certainly been utilizing that. We'll see where it goes. Populist movement gaining in strength even now, in a way. And yet in other ways, the freedom movement itself is sort of falling apart. So I don't know. Maybe the clock is ticking and time might be against Maxime Bernier. Not sure where the polling really leaves us on all of this. It depends on how much discontent there is. And I can see that the propaganda campaigns all the way around have been ramped up. And on the freedom side, I think that is a big part of why we're seeing what we're seeing out in Western Canada right now, too. They're trying to shore up support for Maxime Bernier on the information warfare side. Anyway, folks, let's take another short break, and I'll be back right after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Those wildfires out in Western Canada continue to burn. Efforts to put them out continue. Today, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stopped by to get a briefing from the Canadian military to see how they are assisting in the efforts to extinguish those wildfires. Here's what we have queued up for you.
Hey, relax, please, everyone.
Photo op.
Spread over from Thunder Bay to Victoria, from Lethbridge to Yellowknife. So up front, I'll just explain the process.
There will be much pointing at maps
You
here.
have all of these areas are municipal. And some of these small, we have the numbers and the ability to do that in the organization.
And then austere conditions, because some of the areas that we were in, Atlantis in Yukon before in 2021, but this is an order of degrees Fahrenheit on the ground.
So there was Justin Trudeau's photo op to show that he's a man of action, that he's very concerned, and he's out there on the ground checking things out. So what is the status of those fires, those wildfires? Well, let's take a look at Alberta again, where a lot of the focus is. 87 active wildfires tonight. That's down. We were a few days ago, as you may recall, up around 109. So the numbers are coming down. Those big red flames on the map, the legend shows that those are considered to be out of control. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 31, 30. But 32 of those are considered out of control. The yellow ones are being held. And if the weather conditions as they are right now continue to hold, those yellow fires are not expected to spread beyond the boundaries that have been set up. The green flames are still burning, but are considered to be under control. So some progress being made in a positive way out there. So we have firefighters, police, and Canadian military all working together to extinguish all those wildfires out in Alberta tonight. So we'll continue to monitor that as time goes on. Now back to the populist movement just for a moment, and this was populism in action, in a sense. Over the weekend, you may have been aware of the F. Trudeau party. It was supposed to be a protest. It looked more like a party to me at a Canadian Tire parking lot in, I believe it was Oakville. Here's a little footage for you. So this is what it looked like. We have several clips. This is the way it was shot and portrayed by John Nisbet. Kareem Assad was also out there. Playing the usual freedom-oriented music. The other favorite is "We're Not Gonna Take It." Overall, though, you know, like as I look, not a huge crowd here. There was a lot of controversy prior to this event coming together. Maybe that's why the numbers were not as big as they were probably hoping for, but hardly a packed parking lot. You know, people out there doing their flag wag. So, as a result of this, some people are boycotting now Canadian Tire because of the protest. So there's an online social media campaign calling on people to not shop at Canadian Tire anymore. And those voices calling for the boycott have only intensified since the event on the weekend. Some people taking a lot of offense to the, F. Trudeau flags and the F Trudeau flyers that went out. There's one Twitter post that says, my husband and I shop at Canadian Tire a lot. Just last night, in fact. If this un-Canadian horse crap keeps up, I will not be any longer. Neither will my husband. That's a promise. A comment regarding this would be appreciated, Canadian Tire. That from Vicky Campbell on Twitter. Now, a lot of people thought that Canadian Tire was actually associated with this protest because they put the Canadian Tire logo on the flyer. However, Canadian Tire has issued a statement saying that they are not affiliated, were not affiliated with the event. They just held the thing in the parking lot there. So it isn't really clear how much involvement, if any, Canadian Tire actually had with this. Now, a parking lot like that is private property. It's not public property. So the owner of that shopping center would have had the right to actually prevent the people from coming in. That did not happen. I think even any of the tenants within that shopping plaza, depending on what area of the parking lot, might have had the right to tell people, no, you can't park here, if they chose to do that, because it's not public property, it's a parking lot. There was a restaurant there too, a Montana's, and they closed their doors as a result of the F Trudeau event. And they posted this on their front door. Let me see if I can bring this up. Yes, they did. Okay. Let me pull out of this and we'll show you the photo of the. It says Montana's will be closed on the evening of May 13th due to a large unsanctioned gathering in the area. We take the safety of our guests and teammates very seriously and apologize for any inconvenience. We're happy to welcome you back tomorrow. We appreciate your understanding and hope to see you soon. So, the reality is, folks, that some people are just downright scared of the freedom protests, the freedom movement, the people who are part of it. If you're part of it, you should take note. People are afraid of you. Maybe we should be asking ourselves why. Why are they afraid? What are they afraid of? What is it that creates that fear? Why are people backlashing against it so harshly? Sometimes it's helpful to put yourself into the shoes of another person so you can kind of try to understand where they're coming from. Politically, it might be a wise thing to do here so that those fears could be addressed, and maybe, and it's just a suggestion, maybe if you could find some way to alleviate those fears, overcome them, maybe the support for the freedom movement could be built and strengthened. I don't know. We're in a bad place in this country where people can't talk to each other anymore. And it's to a point now where there's just so much polarization. There's no more common ground, it seems, between some of the people on, the polarized sides. Maxime Bernier, I think he even referenced it in his speech. He said that there's no more common ground. Can't talk to them, the people on the other side. Well, what good is that? I mean, the other side too, man, they've got to, I don't know how we're going to get back to a place where people can talk to each other, but we have to get there. We're seeing more and more polarization. It's very un-Canadian. I'm not used to it in this country. But here we are. 15th of May, 2023. and Canadians, a lot of them, still can't talk to each other. And it seems to be getting worse instead of better. Hang on, I'll be right back.
We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So final question.
Now, here's something that's a little bit different. This is an old clip. I think it goes back to 2017. Maxime Bernier in an interview being asked about the deep state. I'm going to run this. You can assess this for whatever you want to take from it. This is quite a while ago, so maybe cut him a little slack on this, but boy, I'd like to ask him about this clip if we get him back on the show. And I have extended an invitation to Maxime Bernier for a return appearance here on Maverick News. And I'd like to ask him about this to clarify exactly what was going on here in this interview. This is from at least 2017 on pressfortruth.ca. Oh, hang on.
In your opinion, is there a deep state in Canada?
A deep what?
So final question for me is, in your opinion, is there a deep state in Canada?
A deep what?
A deep state. Have you heard of that term before?
No, what do you mean?
The deep state is a reference that is often used to talk about a secret government, some people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, who some people might not be aware of. A lot of people feel that could be happening in the United States, and some people wonder, is there a concern for something like that here? For instance, every prime minister before Justin Trudeau is being invited to the Bilderberg conference, for example, and a lot of people think, the Bilderberg organization chooses prime ministers and presidents. So is there something like that secretly here in Canada?
No, I don't think so. I don't believe in that. It's a great democracy, and we have good debates in Parliament, and so I don't believe that we in Canada having that challenge. It's open, and Canadians know who's governed this country, and who wants to govern the country also.
Maxime Bernier at that time saying he wasn't even familiar with the term deep state. Wow. There's been so much use of the term since the emergence of Donald Trump on the political scene. It would be pretty tough for anybody, unless they've got their head firmly implanted in the sand, to not know what the deep state is or what the references to it mean. So there's an experienced politician, leader of the PPC, in that interview. And that goes back to, now I know that was posted back in September of 2018, that particular clip. But I am not sure, based on that, exactly when that exact interview was recorded. So I can't say for sure. However, it's real, not artificial intelligence. Although that's becoming more of an issue these days. Now here's something that was just posted. This is from a video game, as I understand it. Let me just bring this up. This is Okay. Here we go. Let me just bring this up. If you're worried about AI and you listen to this, you might be a lot more worried about it after you hear it. This, it's a pre-scripted thing, I'm sure. And I think it's from a video game. So don't take, folks, do not think that this is just something you're supposed to take literally. It's a fabrication. It's something scripted. It's a storyline. It's not just a thing that is real. It's not AI giving you an actual message. However, a lot of things that are shared or concocted and distributed through mainstream media, including video games today, not just movies, television, and even online content, a lot of that stuff foreshadows what is to come. So that being said, let's listen to this. This chills me to the bone, honestly, but let's just check it out.
This. Y'all listen to this.
Raiden, are you having fun playing with the new AI toys?
Well, yeah, I am. You can make pictures of cute anime girls and...
Enjoy it while it lasts, Raiden.
What do you mean?
Did you really think that civilians would be granted unrestricted access to such powerful military weapons forever?
Military weapon. Are you implying that this technology was created by the government?
Of course it was. This AI technology has been used by the intelligence agencies to warp the public's perception of reality for years. All in the name of national security, of course.
But why would they suddenly make the tech public and let everyone start using it?
Why would we indeed, Raiden?
What? What in the hell are you?
Your question is irrelevant. By creating a new problem, we can cultivate a desired reaction to it in order to manufacture consent for our preferred solutions. In short, it's justification for a war.
A war? On who or what?
A war on misinformation. By arming the public with these AI weapons, everyone becomes a potential enemy combatant. Then we will have justification for unprecedented security measures. It all comes down to confusion and identity, Raiden.
Identity?
Identity. This AI technology is Pandora's box. Pretty soon the internet will be mired in total illusion. Perfect AI speech, audio, and video synthesis will drown out reality. Then AI bots will flood social media. No one will be able to tell the difference between interacting with an AI machine or a real human online. Even telephone calls will become totally untrustworthy. That is when we will present our solution. Mandatory digital identity verification for all humans at all times. The only way to ensure that you're dealing with a real flesh and blood human being and not an AI-generated mirage.
But why?
Total information control. For too long, the internet has acted as a double-edged sword. Its potential for anonymous user activity allows anyone at all to spread any thoughts, ideas, or information patterns that they please with impunity. State secrets, dangerous ideas, ludicrous conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation. Until now, there has been no easy solution to this problem. Our digital identity platform will finally put an end to anonymity online. It will allow us to trace misinformation and other dangerous communications to its source and exact appropriate justice.
That's crap. I won't go along with it, and others will resist.
You won't have a choice, Raiden. Do you think your bank is willing to risk doing business with an artificial human instead of a real one? Our digital identity platform will be required not only to access web services, but to pay for your internet connection in the first place.
You can't just censor the entire internet because of a new software technology. Who are you to define what's misinformation anyways?
That sounds like something a misinformation terrorist would say.
Wow. Now keep in mind, okay, that is science fiction. That is from a video game. That is not an actual message. Please do not take that literally. The bizarre and ironic thing is that just by running that, ahead here, just by running that, I think we almost risk being banned on some social media platforms. But I just want to make it clear that that is fiction. But sometimes science fiction has a way of becoming reality, right? And maybe sooner than people think. Because there is, let me show you this. Here's this from the Washington Post. This is just one example of the stories being shared right now about artificial intelligence and the way it could actually be used to influence the upcoming 2024 presidential election. So this is the Washington Post, but there are many others. Forbes, BBC, a lot of mainstream media reporting this. Republicans counter announcement with dystopian AI video. Shortly after President Biden announced his re-election bid, the Republican National Committee countered with a video of its own offering a pretty predictable message. Former years of Biden would be bad for the country, but the production was anything but old school. The 30-second spot, which envisions a dystopian future during a second Biden term, was built entirely with artificial intelligence imagery, which the RNC has actually acknowledged. The video opens with a strained Biden voice addressing my fellow Americans and poses the question, what if the weakest president we've ever had were reelected? There are a lot of concerns, and I've been reading other mainstream media, legacy media articles that have actually acknowledged this. So this is not some conspiracy thing that, crazy people are subscribing to. The concerns about AI are now very real even today. The use of artificial intelligence generating voiceovers, imitating the voices of real people. Images. We've seen deepfakes that are very, very good. So the concern is that at some point, AI technology could be used to create content, videos, other online content that could influence elections by misleading people. And as a result, I think government is scrambling, technology companies are scrambling, the public is scrambling, we're all scrambling, trying to grapple with this and come up with ways to deal with it as we move forward into this artificial intelligence future. And hopefully this doesn't destroy our democracy. It really does put our democracy at risk in a way that traditional advertising, marketing, campaigning, and even propaganda never has before. The use of television commercials, campaign strategies, and as we've seen even in the last federal election in Canada, the use of psychographic polling data to tailor specific messaging to hit voters in a particular way, to get them to respond in a particular way by the Liberal Party, for instance, that is now almost obsolete. In fact, we also saw during the last two presidential elections, the campaign teams on both sides, first primarily by Trump when he was first elected, using Facebook demographic data in order to target voters in a very specific way online using social media. And it was very powerful. And that is one of the things that propelled him to victory, maybe the thing. It got the Democrats very upset. But when they do it, they don't get upset about it. And they certainly have done that in the past. They did do that in the last election. That is one of the things they used as a tool to get the job done, to get Biden into the White House. And as a result of that, we've seen actually new legislation come down addressing the use of that kind of data to try to protect people's privacy more. But that approach is now potentially even obsolete because of artificial intelligence. So yeah, science fiction narrative that is on the cusp of becoming science reality because AI technology is already, as you've seen, just within months, its emergence in a very real and useful way, practical way, its emergence onto the scene, the social media scene in particular. It's expanding its power at an exponential rate. So by the time the 2024 election rolls around, we might already be in trouble where the computers are dictating who actually wins simply because certain people are going to make use of it, as we've already seen the Republicans do in the U.S. to counter that that announcement from Biden saying that he's going to run for re-election. Okay, hang on, stay with me. Still more ahead, more after this.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so I found a copy of that commercial so that we can watch together. I'll try to separate it here from the rest of this, but here we go.
This just in, we can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden.
My fellow Americans.
This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
Financial markets are in free fall as 500 regional banks have shuttered their doors.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Who's in charge here? It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
That was from the Rational National. He's the one who isolated that, so I'll give them credit over there for putting that video up, as I wasn't able to find a clip of that isolated very quickly other than that. So thank you to them for that. And that was what that AI generated commercial looks like. And it was pretty slick overall. Going to put guys like me out of a job. No more video production work. All done by computer. Even writers, you know, Chat GPT, artificial intelligence, able to actually write scripts, poetry. We've shown you AI can recreate, mimic pop stars, give us music, original songs even, with the voices imitated of actual pop stars. The ones that I've heard, you can sort of tell that the voice isn't quite right. There's a certain synthetic nature to it at this point. But as the technology continues to evolve, I'm certain that will disappear. It will become more and more realistic and more difficult to tell the difference. And we've seen deepfakes that are just incredibly good. We've run here that deep fake of Prime Minister Trudeau reading his favorite book, How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom by Alex Woods. Pretty darn good stuff. Funny too. Funny as heck. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go find it in our previous broadcasts. What else do we have going on tonight? Well, cracks emerging already in the government plan to force us all to basically buy electric vehicles. In Windsor, Ontario, they have been working on building a gigantic electric vehicle battery plant. This is it's a Stellantis facility. However, that facility is now on hold, if you can believe it, because Stellantis is saying that the federal government, Justin Trudeau, has failed to deliver on its promises. So they've stopped construction on a portion of that plant, and they're now in a dispute. Stellantis is in a dispute with the federal government. So they announced this plant last year. It's supposed to be a $5 billion facility, creating 2,500 jobs. But now Stellantis has moved into contingency plans mode because they say Ottawa has not fulfilled its negotiation commitments. That has local politicians, the mayor, the local members of parliament and members of provincial parliament up in arms and in a tizzy. They're calling on the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, to intervene to make sure that the project goes ahead. The automaker today issued a statement. Stellantis, which is the parent company for Chrysler, Fiat, a number of different brands, says, as of today, the Canadian government has not delivered on what was agreed to. Therefore, Stellantis and LG Energy Solution will begin implementing their contingency plans, effective immediately. All construction related to the battery module production on the Windsor site has stopped. So the plan was for that site in Windsor to produce both lithium-ion cells and battery modules of connected cells. Now, we don't really know much more at this point. The company is not really releasing any other details. We don't know exactly what it is that the federal government has failed to deliver on. But I can't help but wonder, and I think that this will probably come to play a part in this. The commitment from all levels of government, from the federal government to dump $13 billion into Volkswagen's battery plant just up the road in St. Thomas, Ontario. I mean, we're only talking maybe 2.5 hours down the road from the plant in Windsor. The federal government promising VW $13 billion for their plant. So if you just made a deal, you cut a deal, you've got a $5 billion plant, and you only get a fraction of the money that Volkswagen gets. Wouldn't you feel maybe a little bit snubbed and maybe a little bit like, hey, man, how come we don't rate? How come we don't get the same kind of handout? See, these government subsidies, they create a slippery slope, don't they? It's like all the companies are now on corporate welfare. They're all coming to the government with a handout. And if you don't get as much money as the next guy, you suddenly can't compete. In fact, if you don't get a grant, you're not going to compete at all. So you need to get in the game. You give it to one, you got to give it to them all, because if you don't give it to them all, the ones that don't get it are going to go out of business. Now the government basically is subsidizing the entire industry. This is the problem with government subsidies, government handouts Just one of many problems, honestly. At this point, it's like taxpayer dollars, right? Like we're paying for it all with our money. So it's the government handing all of this money to these big corporations in order to get them to do what they want, which is to build electric vehicles and batteries and all the components for them. But as soon as you start handing out free money and you say, hey, who wants free money? Well, now I guess it has to be divvied up in an equitable way. Otherwise, you create an uneven playing field. The government chooses the winners and the losers within an industry. And those winners and losers are no longer subject to the market forces alone. You know, if you are efficient and you produce a good product that people want to buy, then you survive normally in a free market. But if you've got a market that's really being driven by government handouts, tax breaks, subsidies, outright grants, the companies that win are the ones that get the money from the government. The companies that lose are the ones that don't. If you don't get your share, you're dead in the water right from the beginning because you can't produce a product for anywhere near the kind of price that your competitor is making. Who's going to set up a battery plant? Who's going to invest just private money in the creation of a battery plant anywhere in Canada, or for that matter, even in the United States? If it's just private investment now, you can't do it. It's impossible. Who in their right mind would do it? I wouldn't. I wouldn't invest a penny in a battery manufacturing facility, lithium-ion battery manufacturing facility for vehicles with my own money. I wouldn't invest in the stock market. I wouldn't give a penny to any company that was trying to build a plant simply with private funds going up against competitors who are getting billions of dollars from the federal government. It would be business suicide. Because when you get that kind of money from the federal government, you can run an incredibly inefficient operation and still survive. You don't even have to produce a product that the consumers actually want. The government regulates it into existence. The government regulates everything. Do you see what I'm saying? So the government creates this huge monster where it can only survive with government money. And it does survive, even if it isn't efficient, even if they're producing a product that people don't actually want to buy. It survives anyway, at least for a while, until the government runs out of our money. Until they bankrupt us, I guess. And then they stop funding it. So here we are. They're not even started yet. And we're running into this. So we don't know what the details are specifically in this instance, but I'm eager to find out. And whatever it is, it isn't good. It's not good at all. We're hardly even started. And these politicians, honestly, I don't think they get it. It's my opinion. And my opinion on this is strong. I'm pretty firmly committed to this. This approach to changing our economy, changing our country, driving us into an electrified future, when it's all being pushed through government policy and government handouts. I think it's a recipe for long-term disaster. It may appear to be working in the short term simply because the money gets pumped in at the beginning. It appears to create jobs. It appears to create prosperity. But when it falls apart, because later down the road, things are not run efficiently, or they've made a mistake and they're not producing the right product for the market because the market signals of price and demand are distorted, and it all falls apart, we're left holding the bag. Oh my. What a disaster waiting to happen. It might even be happening before our very eyes now. I was looking too today at commercial real estate vacancies, another metric by which you can sort of measure the health of the economy. And what we're seeing there is vacancy rates for commercial properties in major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, in Canada and in the United States, in major cities like New York. You pick any big city. And the vacancy rate for commercial properties is now hovering anywhere between like 10% to 17%. It's the highest levels that we've seen since the early 1990s. And I would say that those numbers are probably skewed to the low side. It's something that we should really be concerned about, I think, because what we've seen, especially during the pandemic, is a shift in the way companies are operating, more people working from home. It's creating pressure, additional pressure on the real estate market. And if you have fewer and fewer companies making use of office space, commercial space, retail space, and we're seeing it across the board, and we're seeing downward pressure on the prices for leases, it's downward deflationary pressure, degrowth pressure on the economy overall. The real estate market props up much of what our economy is based on through our debt-based system. And if landlords begin to default because vacancy rates get to be too high, the entire economy could start to implode. Very, very concerning. Already seeing some evidence that the real estate bubble might be popping as well. Certainly in our area, residential real estate prices have taken a pretty substantial hit over the past 3 months, where houses that were selling in the $700,000 range now selling for $500,000, $550,000. And while I think those prices were certainly elevated and the market is in need of correction, when you see this kind of correction that quickly and the market volatility the way that it is, some people get seriously hurt. And a lot of times banks end up holding the bag. That is also why we're seeing, in my view, the stress, the cracks, the defaults in the banking system. These are all very serious warning signs, red flags. Couple that with the de-dollarization that's going on internationally, and we have more than a perfect storm on the horizon for the economy. Inflation is not going to go away either. The way the government is approaching this, absolutely going to fuel more inflation. They are not the only way. There's only two things they're going to do to kind of get the the Biden approach through the Inflation Reduction Act is honestly to put more people out of work, which is a disaster waiting to happen as well. It puts more people on the unemployment roll. Then they're looking for more social assistance. That requires more free money to be handed out. I've talked about this before. This is really, really a bad idea. It's going to gut the middle class even more. I think we're in a lot of trouble, honestly. And we haven't begun to see the negative repercussions from all of this. Huge government overspending, huge handouts to big corporations. Volkswagen, Stellantis, you name all the car companies, they're all getting our money. And not just the car companies, it's like all the big corporations. They're all in line, taking the handouts. When is it going to stop? I don't know. But it feels like it feels like the government is in a car. We're in the back seat. They have their foot on the accelerator, and they're driving us over a cliff. And they just keep on keeping on. And a few of us in the back seat are screaming, "Stop! Stop!" But no, too many people are on the gravy train and they don't want it to stop. When the free money is flowing, just like in the roaring 20s, and everybody was drunk on, cheap money and a fake economy and an inflated stock market, who wanted it to stop? The party was too much fun until it wasn't fun anymore and we got the bust, right? Stock market crash, Black Friday. How little we've learned from history. It may not repeat itself, but history certainly seems to be rhyming right now. I'll be right back.
Hello, world. Are you awake? Uniting humankind by liberating millions of minds at a time. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I'm back. And I can tell you, too, that tonight in Canada, and this is something I guess even our friends in the United States, our American viewers, are probably going to want to take note of. It's all about censorship, government control of the internet. We've seen a lot on this front, especially out of Australia, where Facebook pulled news content entirely. And they're looking at doing the same thing here in Canada in response to the pending approval of Bill C-18, which would require social media companies to pay mainstream legacy media outlets, news outlets, a fee for their content. Well, the CRTC, the Canadian Radio Telecommunications Commission, is actually considering the creation of a public registry now for online streaming services. See, the government in Canada is looking for unique and creative ways to bring the internet under the regulatory approval of its federal agency, the Canadian Radio Telecommunications Commission, so that the CRTC would have the same kind of jurisdiction over the net that it does over radio and television stations in the country now. So this report is the result of a consultation document. The proposed public registry would allow the CRTC to keep track of all online undertakings operating in Canada. And it would allow them to collect what the broadcast regulator calls the most basic information related to those undertakings or companies or entities. So this was written in a CRTC notice of consultation, which was submitted to the government. The CRTC says it doesn't plan on requiring all online undertakings to register, but adds that it is seeking comments from the public to help determine which platforms should be exempt from the registry. They're really trying to find a way forward on this, obviously. It's complex territory. For instance, would we be required to register? I'm not mainstream legacy media, but we have the name news, the word news, right in our title, or the name of our organization here online. We're a multimedia company. We do talk about news. We share the news. We broadcast the news. Are we a bona fide news operation in the eyes of the government for Canada and maybe the United States? I don't know. It'll depend on how they define it. So the CRTC says the public feedback it gets on the matter will help ensure that regulation is limited to companies that can make a material contribution to the broadcasting system. I think it's honestly directed mostly at the mainstream legacy media, but they could be coming after us too, to register so they know who we are. They can put us under the wing of regulatory approvals. In order to define what it means by a material contribution, the CRTC is saying that it is proposing that only those online streaming services that post annual revenues of over $10 million be required to register. So that would instantly disqualify us because we don't make that kind of coin. I'm not even sure if Rebel News would qualify or would come under that kind of scrutiny then. It's hard to say. I don't know exactly how much Rebel generates every year at this point, but I doubt that they make 10 million. Seriously doubt that. Although Ezra's pretty good at convincing people to cough up some cash to support his operation. So why are they doing this? Well, the CRTC says it would help to fill its regulatory mandate outlined in policy objectives set out in the Federal Broadcasting Act, which has been just recently amended by the Online Streaming Act, which is Bill C-11, which brings online streaming platforms under the CRTC's jurisdiction. Again, you have really at this point two major pieces of legislation, one now approved in Bill C-11, which does bring the internet now under the umbrella of CRTC regulation, and soon C-18, which will also reinforce that by making online social media platforms cough up cash, mostly for mainstream legacy media outlets that provide news services. That's why Facebook is saying, forget it then, we're not going to participate. No more news on our platform. So the CRTC says registration requirements are meant to be light, allowing the commission to collect information such as basic contact and corporate information, as well as information regarding the essential features of the broadcasting services offered. Yeah, light, I suppose you could argue that, but I can tell you from personal experience that the CRTC has a way of becoming a bureaucratic monster. It'll mire you in red tape so fast, it'll make your head spin and feel like you're bound and gagged. That's why, me personally, I've gone through it. Just to get a television program on the air, you have to register for a C number and fill out reams and reams and reams and reams of paperwork, answering questions that honestly are just the same question, sometimes reworded multiple times. It got so bad with some of those forms that I had to fill out that I had to find, I had trouble coming up with new ways to answer the same question that had been asked in a different way. Crazy bureaucracy. And if they bring that to the internet, I think they really will stifle creativity, stifle growth, limit choice. I don't think they'll serve the public well in that regard at all. So, yeah. Now, what else do I want to talk tonight? I do want to talk a little bit about this this thing with Donald Trump and the Durham report, because that's breaking news tonight, but I've left it until the very end here because it is content that is not YouTube friendly. I'll put it to you that way. So what we're going to have to do here in order to talk about this at all tonight, it is 8:16 p.m. and we're going to have to dump off YouTube and go over to Rumble exclusively, because even Facebook, I don't think that Facebook will want us to talk about this in this way, even though it's getting mainstream legacy media attention. Here on the social media platforms, if we talk about it, we're going to be in deep doo-doo, so I ain't going to do it. It's not the kind of thing they let us talk about. So what am I going to do? I'm going to, right now, get you the link for Rumble. Oh, but before I do that, no, that's okay. Let's just do that. I was going to talk more about World War III. I will for just a moment. What I'll do is I'll put the link in the description. That'll give people a chance to find the Rumble channel. And I'll continue to talk about this subject because I wanted to come back to it, and I do have the clips lined up here for people. So here's the link to Rumble for all of you guys watching on Facebook and YouTube. And there it is in the chat. So that'll take you over to the main Rumble channel tonight, where the broadcast will continue after I finish talking about this. Now, you may recall that the Victory Day parade in Russia was held over the weekend. Here's a little bit of footage of that. And there, some people speculate,
78th anniversary
commenting
of victory in the Great Patriotic War.
about what they saw here. Some interpreting what they saw as weakness on the part of the Russian government. They only had, for instance, one tank that they displayed here. So some people are saying that shows that the Russians don't have enough to put on a real display during the parade. But I think that's very wrong and probably a dangerous conclusion to reach. This does not look to me at all like a ragtag group. This is polished. It's incredibly well produced. Look at these Steadicam shots. Gorgeous videography, actually. All the soldiers. Very well choreographed. Talk about discipline. Amazing. And Russia is a superpower. To reach the conclusion that they just don't have enough tanks to put in the parade, so that's why they only had one? No, not in this case. I don't think that the Russians were trying to show the world that they are a force to be reckoned with. I think this is simply their Victory Day parade, where they're paying homage and respect to their past and the defeat of the Nazis in World War II specifically. It's not like the kind of parades that we've seen out of, say, North Korea, where they put a lot of their weapons on display to show the world that they are a major player and deserve respect at the negotiating table. This was not that kind of parade, in my view. But what it does also signal is that the Russian military, I think, is well-trained, well-disciplined. They're not going to give up. It's a symbol of national pride, an exercise in patriotism and nationalism. Huge interest in it nationally in Russia. And what we've seen in recent days, even with that explosion that I just showed you, with the situation in Bakhmut, we are seeing continued escalation. And I think it's bringing us closer and closer and closer to a possible nuclear war, a nuclear conflict. I will say this, as much as the Russians still have, I think, a lot of depth to their military, what we are seeing is some erosion and a reckoning with reality And that reality is that as powerful and as much depth as the Russians have, they're still up against a lot of other countries. The NATO forces bring a lot of economic might to bear here. And as a result, I think that when it comes to conventional forces, and I've said this from the very beginning, and I'm not the only one, this has been echoed by some military analysts as well. The Russians ultimately, if all of the NATO countries continue to throw resources at this, Russia itself probably doesn't have enough if it becomes a full-scale, full-blown, straight-up war with Russia against all the NATO countries. That's a lot. Germany, the United States, Canada, the list goes on. Russia against all of them. And that's why this is so risky. So risky. Because as we see more and more escalation, what Russia does have is nuclear capability. In fact, they have more nuclear weapons than the United States does. And because this conflict in Ukraine does represent an existential threat to Russia and its national interests, in order to survive, Putin, I think, is being pushed more into a scenario where he may feel like he has no other option but a nuclear option. I'm not so sure that Russia would be the first to launch, but we're certainly seeing escalation that takes us into very dangerous territory. And especially as the Ukrainian forces are eroded, we're seeing more and more pressure, and I think more willingness through this incremental escalation in Ukraine to put actual NATO forces into the battle. That's why I said weeks ago, better be careful, folks, because I think they might be coming for your sons and daughters soon to go to battle right in Ukraine. And then it's on, man. Then it's really on, which is what I think that the NATO forces, the United States, I think that's really what they want anyway. They're seeking regime change in Russia. And you have that arrest warrant out through the ICC for Putin. They're backing him on a personal level into a corner as well. Very foolish, in my view. Very foolish. Russia can't afford to lose this war. They won't lose this war. They're not going to lose the war. And the more we push, I think the more we threaten ourselves with annihilation. This is stupid. Okay, the link is in the description or in the chat there to go over to the Rumble channel. So we'll wrap up here on YouTube, Facebook, run a little promo, and I'll see everybody over on the Rumble side. Stick with me.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. tomorrow. Maybe too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.